Hilchos Mezuzah, Perek Shishi. The laws of Tefillin, Mezuzah, Sefer Torah, chapter 6. We're specifically learning now about the Mezuzah. So we have here on the screen, we have the pasuk, Uchtavtam al mezuzot betecha uvisharecha. That's the verse where the commandment for the mitzvah of Mezuzah comes from. You should write it on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. So from this verse, we learn that the only place you have to put up a Mezuzah is, first of all, if there's mezuzot, if there's a doorpost. Second of all, it's betecha, has to be a house, or bisharecha, or it's a gate that leads to a house. And so from this verse, the Rambam is going to learn 10 conditions that make a house into a house and obligated in Mezuzah. It says the halacha aleph. Asarat tna'im yesh babayit. There are 10 conditions in a house. And only then, if all 10 qualifications are met, does the person living there have to make a Mezuzah. And if even one condition is missing, patur min mezuzah, he is exempt, or the house is exempt from Mezuzah. And they are the following 10 conditions. Number 1, sheyiyebo arba amot al arba amot o yater, that it should have a space, the area of 4 cubits by 4 cubits or more. It's about 6 feet by 6 feet. 6 times 6 is what? 36? About 36 square feet. V'sheteyen alo shtei mezuzot. It has to also have 2 doorposts, and we'll define what that means. For example, sometimes you have in the houses today, you have a doorpost on one side, and then the other side is just like a plain wall. Right? There's no actual post on the other side of the doorway. The yellow mashkof, it has to have a lintel. The top part can't just go, let's say you have doorposts going to the roof, and then it just meets the roof. There's no lintel. It's also not a doorway. The yellow tikra, and there has to be a roof. It can't just be an open area. The yulod latot, this is a big chidush according to the Rambam. In order to be obligated in Mezuzah, the doorway has to have doors. You know, today in our houses we put up Mezuzahs even in doorways, leading to hallways and stuff. That's because the other poskim, the other people argue, other commentaries argue, and they say it doesn't have to have a door. But according to the Rambam, it has to have a door. If there's no door, no Mezuzah. The doorway has to be 10 tvachim tall or more. 10 tvachim is about 40 inches. So you can't have a little, crawl space and needing a Mezuzah. It has to be somewhat of a doorway. The house, the room, has to be chol, mundane. It's not holy. For example, a shul, technically, or a bet midrash, technically, doesn't have to have a mezuzah. Over here, since people live here, people sleep here sometimes, so there's different laws. But technically, or the bet hamikdash also didn't have to have a mezuzah. It has to be made for a human to live there. Not like, let's say, for animals, a barn. The asur dirat kavod, that has to also be made for an honorable dwelling. Sometimes you have places where people happen to be, but it's not for an honorable thing. It's a dirty place, for example. The asuli dirat kevar has to also be made for permanent dwelling. What do you think? Should a patient in a hospital have to have a mezuzah on his doorpost?
Cedar Sinai has them.
Cedar Sinai has them.
Yeah. Or at least in the emergency room.
Yeah, they do. And hotels in
Jewish hospitals.
Jewish hospital, Jewish life.
Yeah. Some commentaries say you don't need. Because if it's not permanent, you don't have to have mezuzah. Now I get it. If it's Jewish owned, they want to put mezuzahs on their doorpost, but technically speaking, some commentaries would say you don't need a mezuzah on a hospital room. Okay, now we're going to go back to all 10, and we're going to define each one. So we begin with the 36 square feet thing. Halacha bet. Bayit she'en lo arba amot al arba amot, patur min ha-mezuzah. If a house doesn't have 4 amot by 4 amot space, it's exempt from mezuzah. But what happens? What if there's enough area to square out 36 square feet? Like we call it today, like literally, there's the area of there's that footage available. It may be a round building, maybe it's a triangular building, right? Even if it's round or pentagonal, it has 5 walls, but there's room in it. In the area of the room, you have those 4 by 4 amot. The ein tzarich lomar, needless to say, she'im haya orko yater al rachbo, that if it was rectangular, you had more length than width. But because you have 36 square feet, ho'il v'yesh bo l'rabeya arba amot al arba amot chayav b'mezuzah. Since there's enough room to square out 4 by 4 amot, it's obligated in mezuzah. Now, there's somewhat of a question. You have a big circle, right? There could be 36 square feet without being able to draw a square of 36 square feet. If you keep the the protrusions, those could be part of the 36 square. That's according to some commentaries. Some commentaries say when the Rambam says l'rabeya arba amot, it means the circle has to be big enough to draw a square of 4 by 4 amot, which would mean that the room has to be a little bigger. Because in order to draw a square in a circle of 36 square feet, you have to have more square footage. I couldn't get a picture of it, so that's why it's not on the screen. Halacha Gimel, Achsadra. Okay, let's see if this picture came up clearly. It's not that clear, but you can see between the two structures on the side, there's this little, I guess, portico, a little area that the Rambam says, V'hu makom, it's a place, sheyesh lo shloshak talim v'tikra. It has 3 walls and a roof. So the 3 walls are the walls between the 2 houses, and there's a roof there also on top, and a little gateway to get inside. That's called an achsadra. Afal pi sheyesh la shnei patzimin beruach revi'it. Even if in the 4th wall, the 4th direction, there are 2 sturdy pillars, so those could maybe be a 4th wall. P'tura min ha-mezuzah. This kind of a little, what would you call it? An exedra, I think, is like the Greek word for it. In Greek architecture, it was very common to have this kind of structure between, like a little atrium, I guess you can call it. But it was exempt. Those pillars at the entranceway are only made to hold up the roof. They're not meant to be doorposts for the doorway. So they're going to be exempt. If you have just a roof with no walls, it's simply standing on pillars from this side and from that side. A little imagery over here. This one could be, it would require a mezuzah because the poles are a little bit thicker than normal. But imagine there was just 4 poles, okay, one on each side. It's just holding up the roof. So there is no walls technically. Even though it's in the form of a house, p'tura, it's exempt from mezuzah. Because you can't call it having doorposts. Because the poles are only meant to hold up the roof. Let's say this place is in the middle of a park, right? You're traveling in a park, you want to go rest in the shade. So they made a roof so you can rest under the shade. And they made, because a roof can't stand in midair, so you have poles holding up the roof. Fine. But the poles aren't made as doorposts. Therefore, such a place wouldn't be obligated in a mezuzah. Now, we're going to talk about an arch. Halacha Dalet. It's a classic archway in a house. Halacha Dalet says, Bayit sheyesh lo mezuzah mikanu mikan. You have a house or an entranceway that has doorposts on each side, beautiful doorposts. V'kipa kimin keshet al shtei mezuzot bimkom hamashkof. And you have a little dome, like a rainbow, over the 2 doorposts in place of a lintel. In English, we call this an arch. So there's no point where you can say that this is the corner of the doorpost and the lintel, because it just kind of goes round and round. But there is an element in this arch, you can see there's a whole bunch of space where the doorposts are straight up. So therefore, the Rambam says, Im yesh begova hamezuzot asarat tfachim o yoter, if the doorposts on the side are going straight up for a height of 10 tfachim, about 40 inches, then even if it ends in an arch, chayav ba mezuzah, it's obligated to have a mezuzah because there's already doorposts, full-on doorposts here. But if you don't have 10 tfachim of doorpost, couldn't really come up with a better picture, but this is something like it, where the arch begins at such a low point. There's some famous airport where they have like a huge archway you walk through, but it's arching all the way from the bottom. It's literally the arch begins. There's no point where the walls go straight up. It's just round. And here also, there's a little bit of a doorpost, but not enough. It's a tiny bit of a straight up space, and then right away the arch begins. So then, p'turim, they're exempt from a mezuzah, because there's no lintel. Lintel has to be a straight thing, and the arch is not considered a lintel, and there isn't enough of a doorpost to qualify it as a doorpost. And this today is very common. People have homes where they build archways, and you have to make sure that there's enough height on the side of the wall before you put in the mezuzah. Halacha hey, bayit she'en lo tikra. If you have a home with no roof, home I guess it wouldn't be a real home. It's like some kind of a room, let's say. There's no roof. Patur min ha-mezuzah, it's exempt from mezuzah because that was one of the 10 conditions. In order to be a house, beitecha, it has to have a roof. Hayam mikzato mekureh or mikzato eno mekureh. What happens if you have a place that's half roofed, half not? Partially roofed, partially not. Yera'eli, says the Rambam, it appears to me. It's not discussed in the Talmud, but the Rambam is ruling on his own authority. He says, I think, she'im haya hakerui keneged hapetach, if the roofed area was attached to the entrance, so as soon as you walk into this room or structure, you go under a roof, and only later you come to the place where there's no roof, shu chayav mezuzah. It's obligated in a mezuzah. there's somewhat of an argument if the roofed area has to itself have 36 square feet, arba amot, or it includes the whole area. The commentaries discuss this. But according to the Rambam, as long as the roofed area was right away, you're obligated in mezuzah. If not, then it's not. Because let's say if you walk in and right away there's no roof, and later on there's a roofed area at the end of the room, that's not enough to obligate it in mezuzah. And the Rambam says a general rule, you always must put up doors in the doorway, and only then will it be obligated in a mezuzah, because, according to the Rambam, the doorway has to have a door. Today we don't rule like that. Today we rule that even if there's no door, even if it's just a doorway, you put up a mezuzah as we do in our homes and everywhere that we know. We do use doors specifically sometimes. We'll get to it later in the chapter to determine which side you put the mezuzah. Depending which way the door opens, that's which side you put up the mezuzah. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Halacha Vav. This is actually divine providence. We're during the 3 weeks, time when we mourn for the Holy Temple, and we're supposed to learn about the Beit HaMikdash. So here, we're going to learn a little halacha that has to do with Beit HaMikdash. It says the Rambam, Har HaBayit, Temple Mount, Halashachot v'ha'azarot, and all the rooms in the temple, and the courtyards, Ubatei Knesiyot, Ubatei Midrashot, and included in this is shuls and study halls, She'en bahen Beit Dira, which have no living quarters. They're like just a shul, that's all they are, there's no rooms to live there. P'turin, they're actually exempt from the mezuzah, Lefi she'en kodesh, because they are holy, and by holy, the Chassam Sofer explains, this means even if there is a technically living quarter, it's living quarter for the holy, not living quarter for the humans. It's the holy temple. It's not meant for regular people to live there. It's meant for Hashem to live there. Beit HaKnesset shel Kfarim, but what happens if you have a shul in the villages? Sheha'orchin darin bo, was very common for guests to live there. They would have a little side room, and the guests would come for Shabbat, stay there, place to sleep. Chayav mezuzah. Then the entire shul, on account of that room, becomes obligated to have a mezuzah. V'chein Beit HaKnesset shel Krakin, even if it's a shul in a big city, and there happened to be living quarters. Im hayabo Beit Dira, if there was a place to live there, chayav, you're obligated. Kol hasha'arim shahayu ba'mikdash, says the Rambam, every gate that was in the holy temple, lo hayalahem mezuzot, did not have mezuzahs. Chutz, except for mishar nikanor v'shalifnim mimenu. I want to see if you can see my arrow there. Oh, okay. This is the Beit HaMikdash structure right over here. This area is called the Ezrat Nashim, the women's courtyard, and there's 4 famous lishkot over here. This area is called the Azara, the main courtyard, and then you have the Heichal, the actual building. Okay? So this gate, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of small lettering. It says Shar Nikanor, right above my blue little ball. See there? Yeah. Shar Nikanor, Nikanor's gate. This gateway over here, going into the Ezrat Yisrael, had a mezuzah. Shar Nikanor. Says the Rambam, Vishalifni mimenu. And all the gates that are inside past this is a reference to these gates over here. Into the Azara, there's 7 ways to enter. Here's a gate here, here's a gate over here, and that's a gate over there. And also up here you had 3 gates. 1, 2, 3. So these 6, plus the Shar Nikanor, all of them had mezuzahs.
But nobody lives there.
Oh, why? Says the Rambam, there is somebody who used to live there once a year. V'shel lishkat parhedrin. There was a special room called the parhedrin room. It's all the way over here, I don't know if you can see it. Little letters on top of the blue ball. It says Lishkat Palhedrin. Some call it Palhedrin, some call it Parhedrin. Bottom line is, this is the room where the Kohen Gadol, for 7 days before Yom Kippur, would spend the week. They would take him away from his house so he wouldn't become impure in any way, shape, or form, and he would live there. So this little room, you can only enter it from inside of the Azara. So any doorway that was used to get into this massive courtyard, and therefore into here, had to have a mezuzah, because we're going to see later, if you have a house that's obligated into mezuzah, any entranceways to that house are also obligated to a mezuzah. So because this little room was used by the Kohen Gadol, so now all 7 entrances, this one, and these 3 up here, and these 3 down here, all required a mezuzah.
Sorry, what's the 4th thing on top?
Which one?
Like on the top.
Oh, this one over here?
Yeah.
It's another gate according to some commentaries. It's not so clear. We don't know exactly. It's not like an exact map. It's based on what we understand to be certain commentaries. But there's for sure 3 main ones on this side, 3 main ones on that side, and this one over here.
And east is to the right of the screen?
Huh?
Like east is that?
This is east. East is actually to the left.
Okay.
And west is over here. Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, was in the west.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like north,
I mean,
north is on the bottom, north is this way.
That's right. South is up top. It's not like a regular map.
Picture, yeah.
We're going to have a whole set of halachot, learning about every single part of this Beit HaMikdash structure. Huh? The kotel was not just over here. It was actually, this is just the temple structure. There's outside of this is a temple mount, the Har Habayit. So the kotel is like over there. It's not even the wall of the temple structure. It's the wall of the temple mount.
Southwest.
Yeah. So that's what we have it over here. Okay, verstehst? That's the Beis HaMikdash. So let's read that again. Kol ha'sharim she'u b'mikdash lo haya lehem mezuzot. All the gateways in the Beit HaMikdash didn't have mezuzot. Chutz mishar Nikanor, the Nikanor gate, that's this one over here. V'shal lifnim mimenu, and all the inner gates after that. V'shal lishkat parhedrin, and the room of the parhedrin. Parhedrin was either the name of a magician or it means officer of the king. And it was used to make fun of the Kohanim Gedolim who lived in the second temple. They weren't righteous. They were just officers of the king. They weren't real people of stature. But they would live there. Because this room, it was the living quarters for the Kohen Gadol, in the 7 days of separation that he had to go through before Yom Kippur to be prepared for the temple service. Halacha Zayin, Beit HaTeven, a storage house for straw. Beit HaBakar, a barn for animals. Beit HaEtzim, a shed for wood. Beit Otzarot, or a storage room for anything else. P'turin min ha-mezuzah, there, the exempt from mezuzah. Shene'emar, because it says, Beit Techa, your house. Beit Cha miyuchad lecha, it has to be your house designated for you. Prat le'elu v'chayotzei bahen, this excludes these and anything like it. They're not meant for people. The storage, the animals. You don't live there. Lefichach, therefore, Refet HaBakar, if you have a barn for cattle. Shahanashim yoshvot ba. Apparently, I'm not sure what this is, but women used to sit there and adorn themselves, put on makeup. It was like a special room outside of the house. They go to the barn. I don't know why in the barn, but they would go to the barn to do makeup. Chayavot b'mezuzah, that's obligated in mezuzah. Shahada yesh ba yichud b'dirat adam, because you have a designation here for human living quarters. Beit shar, if you have a house inside a gate. A little blurry picture here, but there was a gate guarding an area of homes. And there was a guard who used to sit in this little booth, I guess. And yeah, gated community, he was a guard. So there was somewhat of a living element to it. And therefore we have to discuss it. So we have Beit Shar, Achsadra, we saw that before, it's like the portico between the atrium between the two houses. Umir Pesat, and a porch. V'hagina, and a garden. V'hadir, and a pen, an animal corral. P'turin min ha-mezuzah, they're all exempt from mezuzah mipnei she'enam asuyin l'dira, because they're not meant for living. Im hayu batim hachayavin b'mezuzah p'tuchin l'mikomot elu, if you have a house or a room that's obligated in mezuzah that opens to one of these places, then of course chayavin b'mezuzah, they're obligated in mezuzah. That's why if you have a porch that opens up right from a house, since the house is obligated in mezuzah, the porch also, if there's a little gateway, will have to have a mezuzah. Here in shul, right, the back door, so you have that little thing extending. So there's a mezuzah on that little gateway, because it's a gateway to a door, which is obligated in mezuzah. But if you have stam, a porch sitting in the middle of nowhere, and it's not a proper house, or just a garden with just an enclosed area of a garden, it's not obligated in mezuzah.
Or a shed. How about a shed?
Huh? A shed. If it's not used for living, you don't put up a mezuzah.
Is it outside the house?
Yeah, outside the house, separate storage room. You don't put it.
But for some reason it was like attached to the house, then it would.
If it opens from the house, like if you have a garage, let's say we use for storage, and your house opens into the garage, then that door will require a mezuzah.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't live in your office and you put them in your office.
That's for a different reason. Some say today, because we eat there many times, we'll eat lunch, so the eating gives it a sense of dwelling. But you're right, an office is not as living quarter as a home.
You leave there more than at home today.
Do you?
Yeah,
Well, after COVID, not really. I mean,
people spend time there.
people sleep, but some people sleep in their
Well, they
offices.
dwell there. They
Huh?
they go there like it's. But you
Yeah.
wouldn't put it in a storage. Like if you had a storage unit, you would not put it there. For instance.
Storage unit, no. Yeah. Okay. Lefichach, says the Rambam halacha chet. Therefore, echad sha'arei chatzerot, ve'echad sha'arei mevo'ot. Both the gateways to a courtyard and the gateways to an alleyway. Let me show you what this is. This is very, very common, basic Talmud. Cities used to be set up like this, or little areas of home, neighborhoods. You had the public streets on the two sides, that's Reshut HaRabim. Then you have an alleyway, that's called a mavoy. It was a shared alleyway, and the alleyways would open into courtyards, which is called chatzerot. And the chatzerot would have homes. So you have a couple of elements. You have the street, you have the mavoy is the alleyway, you have the courtyard, and then you have the homes. So the homes are obligated in a mezuzah. Because the homes are obligated into mezuzah, and the courtyards open into the homes, and the alleyway opens into the courtyard. So now they all become obligated in the mezuzah. Echad sharei chatzerot ve'echad sharei mevaot, both the gateways to the courtyards and the gateways to the alleyways. Ve'echad sharei medinot v'ayarot, could be even gateways to the entire city. Because in those days, cities were kind of defined, right? You don't have like today, one city goes into another. You had like a city that was a city. So if you have the doorway of the city or of the province, hakol chayavim b'mezuzah, they would all be obligated in mezuzahs. Shaharei habatim hachayavim b'mezuzah ptuchin tochan, because the houses that are obligated in mezuzah are open into those areas. Afilu asara batim, even if you have 10 rooms, 10 houses, zeh patuach lazeh v'zeh patuach lazeh, each one opens into the other. Ho'il v'hapnimi chayav b'mezuzah, since the innermost one is obligated in mezuzah, kolan chayavin, they all become obligated. And this is why the sages said, Shar ha'patuach min hagina lechatzer. If you have a gateway that opens from a garden into a courtyard, chayav b'mezuzah, it's obligated in mezuzah because the courtyard opens into the home, and each one successively becomes obligated in mezuzah. Halachat tet, beit hakisei, a bathroom, or beit hamerchatz, and a bathhouse, or beit hatvila, and a mikvah, or beit habursiki, and a tannery where they work skins, v'chayotzei bahem, anything like it, p'turin min ha'mezuzah, are exempt from a mezuzah, because they're not made for honorable dwelling. That's why in every Jewish home, there's no mezuzah on the bathroom. That's how you can tell where the bathroom is. If you're stuck in a house when you're a guest, you don't want to ask the host where the bathroom is, you go around and you find the door with no mezuzah, and that's where you go. Mikvah also has no mezuzah. Sukkot chag b'chag, the sukkah of Sukkot, on Sukkot, during the holiday. Ubayit shebisfina, and if you have a home or a room in a boat, Turin min ha-mezuzah, they are exempt from the mezuzah because they're not meant for permanent dwelling. And here's where you see that. Some commentaries say that the hospital rooms, therefore,
some people today they do.
Doesn't have.
They have.
Houseboats?
Yeah.
It's permanent dwelling.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, they live there.
They live on a houseboat.
Yeah,
They
but
want to
half a
read it
year.
already.
Yeah, some people just live in
my
boats.
uncle lived for like a decade on a boat.
I wonder, we have to ask a rabbi about that. Yeah, it could be. If it's a permanent dwelling for you,
Where
then
do
you have
a
to put
shul
a
within
mezuzah.
like a boat, like a ship? You know, there's big Knesset.
Yeah, like on
Ocean line.
a cruise ship, these proper,
But
this
then
cruise ship become hotels.
Queen Mary
Huh?
had a
it
shul.
has to be fixed property, right?
No,
It can be moving. So a train, for example.
that's what I'm
RV?
thinking. No, I'm thinking maybe,
Oh, wow.
I don't know. Maybe, we'll have to ask the rabbis, get the ruling on it. Shtei sukkot shel yotzrim, 2 booths of potters. Potters used to set up shop, and they would have an inner booth where they used to live, and then an outer booth where they used to work and sell their products. Zu lifnim mizu, one inside the other. Hachitzona p'tura min ha-mezuzah. The outer one is exempt from the mezuzah. Lefi she'eina kvuah, because it's not set. The inner one is though, and this is an exception to the rule that typically when something is obligated and there's something outside of it, it's not. It becomes obligated on account of the inner one. But over here, since the whole thing is not permanent, so only the inner one is obligated. Hachanuyot shebashvakim. Couldn't find a good picture for this, but kind of like a street fair, okay? So they have different stores on the street. Let's say these stores would have a doorway to go in, a little booth. People build up stores to sell. They're also pturim. They're exempt from mezuzah because they're not permanent for dwelling. You put them up, you take them down, and it's done. Halacha yud. Bayit sheyesh lo ptachim harbe. If you have a home that has many entrances, even if you're only used to going in and out of one of the doorways, you have to make a mezuzah on every single doorway. What if you have a small doorway between the first floor and the second floor? You're obligated in mezuzah. The commentaries explain this is a horizontal doorway. You ever see a trap door? Like they open up from the floor and it goes right in. So the question is, do you have to put up a mezuzah on a horizontal doorway? What do you think? Rambam says yes. Shulchan Aruch says no. You only put up a mezuzah on a doorway that's standing upright. So if you have an attic in your house and it opens up horizontally, and the doorway is big enough to meet all the conditions, you don't put up a mezuzah. But according to Rambam, you would. Cheder shababayit, a room in a home. This is a separate law because in those days apparently it wasn't so common to have multi-room homes. It was one home, you came in, it was like a studio. But there's some houses that had rooms. So a room in a house, afilu cheder bicheder, even a room inside a room, chayav la'asot mezuzah al shar ha'cheder ha'pnimi, you have to make a mezuzah on a doorway to the innermost room, v'al shar ha'cheder ha'chitzon, and the doorway to the outer room, v'al shar ha'bayit, and then the doorway to the home, shekulan asuyin l'dira ukvuin, because they're all made for living and they're all permanent. why today, when you have a big home with multi-rooms, you put mezuzah in every doorway. Halacha Yud Aleph. Petach sheben bet hamidrash or ben bet hakneset or beito. Lucky guy, he has his home is next door to the shul. They literally share a door. Walk out in his pajamas to Shacharis. He gets up in the morning. He rolls into shul. He gets up in the evening. Rolls into shul. So there's a doorway literally between him and the study hall or the shul. Im ragil latzet v'lavo b'oto petach. If it's normal for him to go in and out from that doorway. Chayav mezuzah, even though it's a doorway to the shul, but in this case, because it's also a doorway to his home and he always uses it, he's obligated in mezuzah. Petach sheben shnei batim. If you have a doorway between two homes or two rooms, here's where the law that I mentioned before comes in. Holchin achar hatzir shel delet. We go after the hinge of the doorway. Makom shehatzir nir'eh imo, the place where the hinge can be seen with. Sham kovim et hamezuzah. That's where you place the mezuzah. This is called in halacha heker tzir. Heker tzir means you have to check because the mezuzah has to go on the right side of the doorway. The question is, what's the right side? So you look at which way the door swings. If the door swings inward, you put it on the right going inward. If the door swings outward, you put it on the right going outward. But it's not so simple. That's a pretty blanket statement from the Rambam. In halacha, many, many more factors take into account. You have to take into account the factor of which room leads into which room. If it's progressively going inwards, then sometimes that will dictate where you put the mezuzah, or importance of rooms. Let's say you have a big dining room, which is like where everybody meets, and you can come in from the outside this way, you can come in from this way. So this is like the most important room. Now the other doorways, mezuzahs, will be dictated by that, and they'll go on the right side of those doorways. And there's a big argument, what do you do if you have a walk-in closet? You have a walk-in closet, and the doorway from the walk-in closet opens into the bedroom. Technically, according to these laws, you would put in the mezuzah on the right side going out of the closet. But the problem is, you can only get into the closet through the room. Right? So, what do you mean? Like if you follow the hinges, you're going outwards, but how'd you get into the closet to begin with?
Between going in and out of the house.
So, when it comes to the house, the main doorway of the house, we always put it on the right side going in. That doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
I'm saying if you have a walk-in closet,
So if you're going by the tzir, there is no issue.
Oh, so if you go dryly by the tzir, then you always going inwards. The problem is, it has to be logical. How do you get into that room that you can walk into the bedroom? So one of the Rebbes of Chabad used to say that you can go in through a window, you can climb, you can break through the roof. So as long as there's a way to get in, you follow the hinge. Not everybody agrees with that. Some people say if you have a walk-in closet and the only way in is through the bedroom, then you put in going into the closet.
But if you have a doorway within a house,
yeah.
there's no progressive one direction.
Oh, so that's where you have to consult the rabbi, because you have to figure out because if there's no door, there's no hinge, there's no heker tzir, because there's no hinge, but we still we still take a look at which room leads into the next room, which room has more importance. If you have sliding doors, this becomes also an issue. What do you do with sliding doors? There's a whole section of halacha that rabbis have fun with when putting up mezuzahs, especially today when they start building all kinds of homes and all kinds of doorways and setups. But the bottom line, fundamental part of the halacha is that you follow the hinge. Okay? Heker tzir. Halacha yud bet, v'hechan kol imet ha-mezuzah. Where do you place the mezuzah? Betoch chalal shel petach. You always do it inside the thickness of the doorway. Batefach hasamuch lachutz. If it's a thick doorway, you always put it in the outermost tefach, the outermost area of 4 inches. Bitchilat shlish elyon shel gova hashar. On the beginning of the top third of the height of the doorway. So the doorway is 9 feet. So
6 feet.
after 6 feet, right at the beginning of the 7th foot. If you put the mezuzah in higher than that, kshera, it's kosher. But it has to be at least a tefach 4 inches away from the lintel. You must put it on the right side of the person going into the doorway. If you put it on the left side, psula, it's literally disqualified. That's why it's so important to get rabbinic guidance and doorways and all these swinging doors, because you have to put it on the right side. Ubayit shel shutafin, a home owned by partners, chayav b'mezuzah, is obligated in a mezuzah. Even though the verse says in the singular, al mezuzot betecha, on your doorway, but we still learn that it's obligated with partnership. And now the Rambam ends off this section of mezuzah also with a halachic perspective, like he did when it came to tefillin, an ethical message for mezuzah. Halacha yud gimel chayav adam lehizaher b'mezuzah. A person is obligated to be careful with mezuzah. Doesn't mean with the mitzvah. He has to be careful with the actual object of the mezuzah. It's there to give you something. It's there to inspire you about something. You have to be careful about that. Because it's an obligation that's upon everybody constantly. So therefore, it's on us to be aware of it. And what should we be aware of? The following. Every time you go into your house and you go out of your house, you should meet the unity of Hashem, the name of the Holy One, blessed be He. That's what a mezuzah's message is. You pass by it, you see unity of Hashem. And thereby you'll remember your love for Him. And you'll wake up from your sleep and you're being involved in the nothingnnesses of time. And you will know there is nothing which exists forever, only the knowledge of the Creator of the world. And thereby immediately you will go back to your proper mindset and you'll go in the ways of those that are straight. So the mezuzah is there to remind you, to help you be involved in unity of Hashem. Said our early sages, anybody who has tefillin on his head and on his arm, and he puts tzitzis on his clothing, and a mezuzah on his doorway, he is sure that he won't sin. Because you have so many people, so many reminders, and so many different reminders. The tefillin, as we saw the other day, while it's on you, the holiness makes you humble. The mezuzah is on your door, it helps you remember Hashem when you go outside or when you come inside. And the tzitzis are on your clothing, they remind you of all the mitzvahs, so you have all types of reminders. They are the angels which save you from sinning. As it says, Hashem camps, the angel of Hashem camps around those who fear Him, and He protects them. And the Rambam ends off unusually. Blessed is the merciful one who helps us. He usually puts this line at the end of a halachot. But here we're in middle. Tomorrow we're learning chapter 7. This is only chapter 6. Why does he put this line here? The Rebbe says because the mezuzah is also our help. Blessed is the merciful one who helps us. A mezuzah is a helper. It's there. What's a helper? Right? When someone helps you out, he shouldn't do it all. He should only help you. But he has to be enough of an inspiration to get you to do it. Same with the mezuzah. It's there to remind you about Yichud Hashem and inspire you, and then you got to do it on your own. But Hashem is helping you do it. So therefore, the mezuzah reminds us to always be aware of the unity of Hashem, even when we're outside in the world.